Aaron Sampson here with Darren Sugg, Creative Director of Fortnite.
Thanks for having me by.
Welcome. Today we're going to take a look at some pretty high-level epic characters. We're going to try and take a look at some epic forts. We're going to take a look at cool weapons and just generally get a good overview of Fortnite, which is out in early access.
That's right. It's out on PC, Mac, PS4, and Xbox One right now.
So, first question, just sort of high level. Fortnite. So it's been in development for a long time. You guys are going early access now, and then you guys are looking to do free to play in about a year. Why don't you just kind of tell me about, for people who don't know about Fortnite, just the high level concept of Fortnite?
Yeah, I mean, Fortnite is our cooperative action builder where players loot, scavenge, and ultimately defend giant forts against hordes of monsters. And they do it all in a procedurally generated world.
So that's really interesting because it's a procedurally generated world. I feel like, you know, games like this are all about that loot chase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
What's the idea behind a lot of games in recent times, like post-Destiny, have gone in that direction of making the loot chase the primary focus of the game, and they've gotten rid of kind of the large open worlds that you used to find in MMOs. So, in terms of Fortnite, how are you guys pushing that loot chase without the large zone, large open world?
No, and that's a good question. So basically, you know, RPGs since the beginning of time have been about gathering cool, powerful loot for the players, and you know, becoming more powerful and feeling more awesome, you know, while exploring the game world. And I think that's been, you know, the concept with everything, and then the environment that you express that in, I think, is just ends up becoming secondary. A lot of my background is actually in online games like that, but people ended up becoming a little, I think, sometimes lost in those giant worlds where they're like, hey, I'm alone, but there's all this square footage. And I think one of the things we learned early on with Fortnite, that we actually had the worlds bigger than what they are today, but players ultimately found that a little bit overwhelming. So we actually started constraining them, but left all the good RPG loot chase in it, the elements we had of that before. So, yeah, it's definitely the staple of getting awesome stuff becomes the focus, and the smaller worlds and with smaller groups actually makes you feel more like a hero. It's more personally connected as opposed to I'm one person on a landscape of like 255. Like, you know, if we're back in the EverQuest days, right, where there was hordes of people like beating on one monster. You kind of felt a little lost and less heroic. In I think the new models where people are playing the new games like Destiny or Fortnite, you know, it's a smaller experience with 4 people, so you can really feel your impact.
Were there any changes in the industry while you guys were in development of this game that caused you to change aspects of the game? For example, again, like Destiny or like Diablo, like it seems like those games have evolved and learned a lot of tough lessons over time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the biggest thing that all the games sort of in the modern age have sort of evolved into is the fact that they're all online and they can be updated and iterated through with the players to make the game better. And so I think all those games actually learn in real time, like what is our players like, what are they into, and how do we make that you know, how do we make the best experience for that. And it comes with a lot of power, but it's also interesting too because it's like a piece of art because it's never done at that point, right? And so players are like, when's it going to be done? Well, you know, a lot of these modern games are completely iterating over and over again. I mean, they reinvented Diablo 3 with an expansion. It was awesome, right? That evolution, they wanted to do it, and I think that's developers taking advantage of the platforms they're on in order to do that. The technology allows us to do that. We're no longer constrained to just a singular disc. We can update content on the fly. We can make changes to make the game better and more fun. And you know, I think the only real hurdle behind that is that you have to be prepared for the long haul, like, you know, to iterate through that stuff. And you know, these games take commitments. Like, you know, as we said, you know, we've been working on this game for a while, and we intend to continue to work on it. But a lot of, you know, not everybody has that luxury.
I imagine, yeah, like I imagine having to perpetually develop cuts both ways. It's really interesting. I think we've had people in our comment section, when we're talking about games these days, they almost expect an end game. And we were laughing. A lot of people here at GameSpot remember a time when end game meant you returned the disc to GameStop and then bought another game.
Yeah.
So like, what's it like developing for a game? Because you guys have a year-long plan right now. So you have early access, and then your goal is to go free to play in a year's time.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges to that endless development cycle, or that idea that you're always making end game content?
Yeah, you're always making new events and new activities for the players to engage with. And I think the cool part with regards to the content and events and the things that interest players, aside from the foundation being everyone's like, what's the loot I'm going to get for the activity you're going to make me participate in? But I think we do get to this part is sort of decently mapped. The MMOs and the online games of the past have shown us like the pathway through of like, hey, players like to participate in holiday events. They want husks with little Santa hats on their head during the holiday season. They want to do spooky Halloween events, or they want to do let's say hypothetically we have an endless wave mode that comes out, and it runs for a 3-week cycle, and players see how far they can get during that, and then they get a bunch of rewards for that kind of thing. It's like there's a pretty good roadmap of the way that you treat your players with regards to that once you decide that this is the type of game you are. And so yeah, early on when we decided to up our scope, we're like, we're pretty sure this is where we're going to end up. So yeah, and here we are.
So things like popular games like Overwatch are doing now, like timed exclusive loot and holiday events, and actually quite a few games like I think Rainbow Six Siege is trying to follow that model. Titanfall is sort of chasing that model.
Yep. Yeah, I participated in Lord of the Rings Online, where you're like, what's the holiday special for the hobbits, and you're running around and trying to engage those players. I think there's been a bunch of game types that have existed in the space for a long while. I just think everybody else is like, yeah, that is pretty fun. Let's do more of that. And so the industry as a whole is doing it.
I kind of feel like if you play as a hobbit, you're only concerned about how many breakfasts you're going to eat in the morning.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely they're about pies, actually. Is how it rolls.
That's how they level up.
Yep.
First breakfast, second breakfast, third breakfast. Speaking of leveling, so characters in this game are they're classes, but they're also random. So what's your favorite class? What's your personal favorite class? And what is random within the character?
Yeah, I think everybody I've talked to sort of on videos or whatever always asks me like, hey, what's your favorite class? And I realize that everyone's like, it's a cop-out answer, but it's really like picking which child in your family that you like best. And so I don't have a particularly favorite. I think I just go through phases. Like right now I'm trying to power up my Ramirez, but yesterday on another stream I was playing the Outlander. I was like, maybe I should do that. So I don't really have a favorite, but the way the heroes themselves work, all our heroes are cards basically. So they're unique people. They have a name. They have a specialty, and they're basically part of a class family. So you'll have like the constructor as an example. There's different specs of them in different heroes, and we have a hero called Penny. She's the big constructor that everybody sees with the pink hair and the hammer. And we have a card that's Tank Penny, and she's designed to be a tanky sort of like melee fighter. But ultimately, we have other constructors that amplify their base device, which is as a class ability that basically makes walls regenerate or deals damage to creatures when they attack them. But those are just different specs, and so those heroes the heroes themselves are not randomized. They have a spec and they belong to a family. So players are like, oh, okay, this is the guy that's about base defense, and this is the constructor that's about fighting melee and clearing walls. So they're not, the actual properties on the heroes themselves are not randomized. They're just fixed cards that you can find and collect.
So it seemed like within those classes, those abilities appeared in different orders. For example, the ninja stars and dragon slash might be first or second, depending on So you have to use star levels, which is where you max level a character, and then you star level them
Yep.
to get that second set of abilities.
Yep.
So those aren't randomized, or they are within?
No, they are not randomized. Those abilities that you're getting are part of a spec that a designer has looked at and said, hey, the way these abilities work in this order is a way that we want these to work, and they usually create some synergies with regards to the player. So they're not totally random. This allows us to. We actually went through the iterative development of picking all the pieces and then true randomization. And in the end, we have this hybrid model based on feedback where it's like, yeah, this allows us to curate a good experience for a particular hero card and ultimately balance it in the long run. It's like, is this hero card effective enough? True randomization or true picking. It generates all kinds of problems in either direction. It's usually there's a one dominant spec, or there's or the randomization is just too chaotic and you don't feel like you understand what this guy is supposed to be about in the game world.
Creates that god roll scenario where everybody wants to go after that one thing.
Yeah, and so yep. I mean, right now it's going to be I'm actually very curious to see who shows up at the top of the list of played heroes and which ones people pursue, and we'll iterate through them and make our intent is usually to we want every hero to be viable and awesome, and so we'll iterate through that just like any other hero-based game. And so that's our thing. People always ask me like what kind of feedback can I get? And I'm like, well, we have a hero card system, so tell me about cards that you don't think are as effective as other ones, so we can go back and we can iterate through them and make them tougher and make them feel like they have a place.
For those of you who may just be joining us now, I'm here with Darren Sugg, creative director of Fortnite. As always, likes or subscribes to our channel on YouTube are very helpful to us and let us do these kinds of things. So consider doing that.
Yeah, one thing that's going on right now on the screen is that they're doing a down drone. So a drone, Fortnite uses a bunch of cute little robots to do stuff and drones in the world to ferry people about. And one of the drones has gone down, and the group has to get together to defend it. It's actually one of these missions that only spawns when you're in a bigger group, and it's actually one of the more difficult encounters for groups because it's time based. Your group has to come back together and hold the line while the drone is being salvaged.
So there we just saw the dance move, which people have been doing at the end of every round for the past 2 weeks, and I have no idea how to do it on PC. Can you let the audience know?
Yeah.
How do you dance in Fortnite?
Yeah, so you can go to your global chat and you can type whack dance, and that will execute one of the dance moves. And if you do whack ride the pony, that'll do the other one. So. Yeah, and for controllers, it's down on the D-pad, and yeah, there you go. She's got it, and then you can execute from the emote picker level as well. So yeah, it's been one of our things. Like actually, you were talking about MMOs before. That's sort of like, hey, do stuff in global chat commands is actually sort of a little bit of the legacy of the older online game era.
Nice old school throwback.
Yep.
Let's talk about building because I love building. A lot of people like building.
Yeah, we made a building game, so yeah.
That's why Minecraft is so popular. But one of the interesting things is, so you build by clicking squares. So you have a basic shape, you click squares,
Yep.
and you manipulate that shape. Are there any crazy shapes that people might not know about? Because I know I've seen some weird reverse triangles, and people have made things I don't know how to build yet.
Yeah, actually, as we were doing this before, I was watching. A good one to try out just for right now, if you would, is take a look at the stairs. This is one I like to tell everybody about because it can be somewhat challenging to build. Why don't you try see if you can make the little wraparound staircase?
So he just did that a minute ago.
Yep.
Okay.
And he can rotate that around, and so you can place that in a space. A lot of people are trying to figure out, like we have build puzzle missions on landscape as secondaries, and it's trying to teach you how to do stuff, but people have questions about how do I manipulate that little pad on the ground. So yeah, it's making different versions of those stairs. So although in a pinch, if you're just trying to run straight up into the air, like having a ramp is fine. But if you're trying to actually build, like, hey, I have a 1x1 grid. How do I get up to the top of it? Like I'm trapped in a cave. Like how does that work? You make those wraparound stairs, and then you can just walk your way up in one thing. Like if you're not good at jumping or trying to get your way through.
You're not a ninja with the double jump.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that that's one of the patterns I think is the most useful. There's a there's a ton of other ones, cross ramps, and you'll see like catwalks, and once you get up to the top or the top level, you'll see some of our players begin to build full stone castles, and they have the crenellations at the top, and those are the results of fences that they've edited down. So yeah, there's a ton you can do with the building grid. So whenever you guys are out there playing with the game and you enter in that edit mode on a piece, you can craft, you can experiment. And when it's red, it's not a good pattern. And when it's blue, it's a valid pattern. So you can experiment. And I think over time there's a couple of empty pieces in the patterns that we think we can probably add a few more things to. So yeah, that becomes interesting.
I think early in the game too, I haven't found a use for rooftops yet, or that rooftop cone shape. What is that? What is that designed for?
Well, in the long run, roofs, however you decide to put the roofs, become important to the game because there are lobbers, which are enemies that are basically artillery that fire into the top of your base. So simply walls with no roofs become a difficult proposition because they'll lob over your walls and hit the whatever you're protecting. And then there's also the flingers that actually pick up creatures and throw them onto the top of your base. And then that means that creatures will be running around the inside of your walls if you don't protect it. And so those top pieces allow players to sort of like, you can make pyramids with them, and those pyramids you can kind of stand on top of pyramids and you can see around it rather than flat roofs. And there's a bit of a trick with some of the propane tanks and how they bounce around, and so some of the inclines can affect that as well.
Can potentially bounce a propane tank back off of a roof.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you chain things together? So, for example, shapes and bounce pads. I saw a player do some pretty interesting stuff with bouncing zombies off of cliffs.
Oh, yeah.
At one of the objectives.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you like perpetually bounce zombies between two bounce pads? Or
It's not perpetual, largely due to the way the timing works. One of the pivot for a second is like we run out on the server, so perpetual sometimes can be a little bit weird because everybody has to know where the enemies are at all times, so it's a little bit weird. So there's some delays, but you can do a lot of crazy stuff with them, which is like, imagine you actually have a pop-up trap, and then you put a creature into the air, and then you're able to slam that popped up enemy with another push trap that'll knock them off a cliff and whatnot. So you can double stack them. And one of the interesting older iterations of the game is like we had people being debuffed while they're in the air. So actually, when they're in the air, they take more damage from other trap types too. This is one of those things that we are definitely going to play with in the lifetime of Fortnite, of making some of that way more interesting. So when you build a better mousetrap, there's more cool behaviors with that. And yeah, I'm seeing the players already create like devastating machines where they sort of isolate the creatures and then throw them onto the ground and force them to run back up through a trap maze. They're pretty creative bunch, our players.
Yeah, I want to figure out how to build a zombie cannon at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
Zombie railgun.
That would be actually pretty cool.
Speaking of guns, which people do love.
Yep.
Games like this, I mean, somebody runs by you with a flaming sniper rifle.
Yep.
And you want that gun. So tell me about the gun game. What are some of the higher level guns that people are chasing right now, and what are some of the more creative guns in the game?
So I'll talk more about like sort of the classifications of the guns than the absolute specifics. But we have guns that people always ask, like, hey, I started the game and like a lot of the guns are hyper realistic and like they're the ARs that you would expect and see. And this, he's got it right now on the screen. He has a giant M60 that he needs ammo for, and those are the more traditional, like, hey, I just want to have that good feeling gun. But then as the game unlocks, you start finding wackier and wackier guns. Some good examples of like we have basically a Gatling pistol that consumes a huge amount of ammunition, but is ultra deadly and flinging a bunch of lead at people. We also have laser weapons that basically fire hyper fast laser bolts at which deal energy damage, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then also we have laser weapons that actually bounce as down the hallway. So you'll shoot them, and then they'll ricochet through the corridors and hit multiple creatures at a time. So it's just like one of these things where like we have everything from the beginning ARs to vendor tech, basically our borderline wacky technology guns at the same time. And then of course we have what you'd expect. We have grenade launchers, RPGs as well. So there's some very interesting guns at the end game that begin to really widen the player's ability kits. And one of the other things about those kits is that all the guns in the game, especially at the high level, start having what we consider alterations, which are additional properties on them. So you asked about the flaming gun before, like that's an alteration. It's a fire alteration. And so the front of the guns is on fire, and the bullets that he's gonna pick that thing out. Oh, if he could hit it.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can shoot those out of the air,
which
is what Nick is trying to do right now. I don't know if, yeah, there he goes. So like the truly skilled can just like shoot down the incoming projectiles before they even hit your base. But anyway, sorry about that. So the alterations basically have enhanced properties, everything from recoil speed to damage types. And obviously damage types actually do affect creatures in different ways. As you get farther and farther into the game, you'll begin to run into elemental versions of the husks, so flaming husks and basically lightning husks that have different weaknesses depending on what they're doing. And as you'd expect, the fire husk deals more damage to your wooden walls. So, but if you have a weapon that is basically water-based, it's oppositional element, you'll deliver more damage to those types of creatures as well. And finding those properties and making them work on your guns is like I would say the fourth tier of like when you're super into the game, you start sort of decoding and figuring out how to optimize that.
How do you deal with sort of the difficulty spike in that case? Because I know the elemental mods show up long before the elemental creatures. Do you know about how long you expect people to spend in the first zone? Because it seems like they're not there in that first.
Yeah, they're definitely not in the first zone. One of the things that we're sort of working through is that we didn't make it up. We said we're in early access for a reason, and figuring out the right time to have you in the beginning in Stonewood, which is the first area, and teaching you all the things in that space and having enough time so we don't overwhelm the user is something we're going to be tinkering with. So you probably won't begin to see any of those sort of elemental creatures until you start really getting into Plankerton, which is the second area, and then they start coming out. And our long game plans are to have you'll see storm properties where like there are actually properties on the storms that you're fighting that actually mutate the creature types as well. So you could run into a storm that's like, this is a firestorm, and every creature that comes out of this is going to be flaming, and so you have to be prepared for that. So yeah, so
you have to have crafted that gun.
Yeah, and then you'll have to craft like, okay, well we're going into you'll be able to know on the zone level, like, hey, we're going to go into this firestorm. We better have a couple of weapons, elemental weapons that are going to help us against that.
So actually, this is a good time to talk about this since we ended that round with victory and a sweet dance.
Yeah.
Challenge. So actually, one of the biggest challenges that I found in this game was what you do in between matches. So there's a lot going on there. It feels like there's two different. There's the system when you're fighting, and then there's the system when you're managing your survivors. Now, to be fair, I think games like State of Decay took me a long time to learn too. I took a long time in that game to realize that you were not one player, you were every player. Talk me through. There's just a lot in a lot of systems in the menu in between rounds. What's the main idea behind the management?
So sort of at the top of, actually, that's a great example of we're sort of within this genre where the player is the commander. It is it is you for all intents and purposes. The player is basically the leader of a bunch of stalwart heroes that go out and try to save the world, and ultimately they save people. So as we started deconstructing the idea behind it, we're like, well, if we want you to have a roster of people as you're seeing on screen there, and then what do you do with all the survivors that you're rescuing? Because it's the thematic, the core theme is like, hey, people are important in the world, and we want to make them powerful, integral to the way the game works. So then that's how the survivor cards were born. And the survivor cards themselves, basically, you slot them in squads, just like you do here. If Nick can open up real quick, and you'll see all your different squads. This is the EMT squad. EMT makes sense. It's a health-based thing. It actually just gives your hero more health on boots on the ground. So whenever you play the game, you'll see those little numbers moving. It's adding more fortitude, which is the attribute that increases your health. And so the more powerful the survivors that you invest in this thing, the more health you'll have. Fire Team Alpha is an offensive squad, and the more offensive damage you deal. So figuring out, that basically your core attributes are based on taking care of those squads of people. In the beginning of the game, all you need to know is slot people into the individual slots, and you'll become more powerful, and you will be fine for a few hours. But over time, you begin to realize, like, I need to level all these guys up, and they have pattern matches where, like, they're more efficient in certain areas. Like if you have an actual doctor, putting him with the EMT squad makes him more efficient, and basically gives your hero more health and more power. So that's it. That's the system in a nutshell. It's actually awesome. I've already seen some really awesome gameplay videos, tutorial videos from our community already, explaining it with like, hey, highlight here. This is what it does, and they're doing a great job, like sort of supplementing what should be in the game itself. And this is another piece of our early access puzzle. The stuff on the top level meta, we just haven't spent enough time sort of refining that, and that was we knew where we were going when we get out, and we're like, hey, we're going to go out the door, and players are going to be helping each other to figure their way through this, and over time we are going to make it better and easier for new people to start. But there's this interesting quandary between when you have an early access audience, a bunch of people will figure it out, and then because they're hardcore and they're super into the game, and their hunger for wanting new challenges and new content versus spending time making tutorialization and bringing on new players. So we are constantly walking the line between those two things. And it was an interesting developmental trade-off, because the number one piece of feedback we actually got about Fortnite through all our stuff, Nick's finding some treasure in this upstairs. Well, the number one piece of feedback we had was, hey, I don't have a gaming PC and I really want to play your game. And so we're like, all right, well, we're going to go take Fortnite. We're gonna put all the team resources towards bringing this out so players on the consoles can get access to it. And so we had to redo the UI and redo a bunch of interfaces. But one of the trade-offs that came were like, we're not going to be able to rebuild the full tutorialization in the time frame before that. And we kind of just made that trade-off, and we're like, well, we're going to do this, and we're going to tell people, hey, we're in early access, and we're going to make this part better, and relying upon some of the community initially to get us there. But we are not done. Like we internally, we're like, this is if we are trying to get to a 1.0 version of that, we are at 0.25 of those kind of interfaces. So I expect a significant amount of iteration around both like how do you do things in the game, and the UI and the user experience itself in the next 6 months.
Speaking of survivors, so early in the game, you have an intro mission where you launch a rocket, but you walk into a base with a bunch of survivors who are physically in the game.
Yeah.
Was that an earlier build of the game, or is that aspirational to be more like State of Decay with your survivors appearing in the world?
So yeah, we refer to that internally as our as 3D Homebase, which is like how would you manifest that in the game if we wanted to, and so. That isn't actually an earlier iteration. We just sort of wanted to give people the idea, like there are survivors on landscape that Nick can find right now, which is like, that's just part of the thing. Like these are the people that you're gonna have to save. The initial run through is Ramirez, like it's the story is really, the commander shows up and they are a force of good in the actual overall world. There's a lot of games that are more sort of murky and everything else. Fortnite isn't that. It's basically a more hopeful game, where like what happens if a bunch of people actually band together and try to do something good. So the commander starts out very early on and says like, I'm gonna go help Ramirez. And then Ramirez, when you go and help her, she's already helping other people. Like she's rescuing those survivors. She's trying to hold the line in the face of the storm. And so ultimately, it just is an opening of like, hey, this is one of the central themes of Fortnite, which is like helping other people and protecting them. So yeah, that's sort of the opening of that. So going back around, we talked about how we would manifest that into the game world. But we always knew that we needed to build a UI interface first, because no matter what happens, even if we had a 3D version of it, there's always going to be power players who just want to move through the system and like, hey, I just want to slot a bunch of stuff and then move on. So it's very, there you go, Nick's seeing some of our wall art. But yeah, there are always people that are going to want to have an interface. So we built the interface first, and if we decide to make a boots on the ground version of that where you can see that, I think we will explore that. It's actually really we'll see what happens if the players are like really hungering for that.
So currently, what's persistent in the world is your home base. You go back and do home defense waves and,
The
watch
shield generator. Yep.
watch your base get wrecked. Which leads me to the question of, and some of my coworkers have asked me this. I generally don't pay too much attention to what other people around me are doing outside of the zombie defense wave, and then people are sort of there to work together. But how much of the players in each instance of this world how much of it is them competing against each other versus cooperating?
That's a great question. So, significant amount of the core of the game is built that if you have any other players, around you, you are better off for it. So, one of the things that's like that a lot of people don't realize is that Nick's, in this case on screen, he's actually being augmented by the players around him. His power level is 26, but his base power is not that alone. He's actually, just because he's in a world with other people, their power, or the power level of everybody of the team is just augmented. So it's mathematically, you are tougher just for having other people around. So even if you play the game and you're like, hey, a guy isn't like within 3 feet of me, you are better off for having other people out there. So right away from the beginning, we built that in combination. And that's actually one of the interesting parts of getting the balance right, because early game, we want you to be able to play the game by yourself, actually, for quite a while. But if you start stacking up with a pro team with a bunch of stuff, like, you quickly become quite powerful. And that's what, we do want you to be able to do that. But that's a low-level system. The next thing that we did in the game is to people don't have to compete. All right, I see he's got one of the laser weapons already. Is you can share guns freely. Like, there are no level requirements for picking up and shooting a gun. So if your friend shows up and they have a ton of schematics, they can actually manufacture and craft guns for you and just drop them on the ground, and you can pick them up and have a good time with them. Like, it's basically one of the intrinsic things we wanted to do. So therefore, you're happy to hang out with a guy who's tougher than you, because they can make stuff for you, and being generous is good. Now, you're asking how does that help me? I'm a selfish player if that was the case. Well, your scores, no matter what activities are taking place on the game world, even if you're doing stuff like, hey, you do a little mission on the side while your friend's doing something else, those scores actually aggregate at the end, so they add up, and the XP and your success rate of the whole group is added up. So everybody is made more powerful by that. So the XP is based on everybody's activities, not your own solo. So even having that guy who's like, that doesn't show up until the actual base defense happen, if he's out there harvesting or getting stuff, he's giving you score, and you are getting more powerful as a result when you go through the mission rewards at the end. Interesting.
Or the Outlander who's going to go find all the treasure chests on the map.
Yeah. Now that there are some, we've long debated whether or not we should have instances of every, when you find a treasure chest on the game map, should it be exposed to every player? That's true of most of the activities. Like, if you participate in husk encampments and you wipe them out, everybody gets a little present box. You see that when you guys play. And we debated about how that should work with treasure chests. And right now, the reason why we chose what we did, at least to start, is the fact that if we were to assume that everybody in the game gets a gun or gets a piece of treasure from those treasure chests, basically means balance-wise that everything is multiplied by 4. And over time, if you want to keep that in balance, that means you have to degrade the amount of awesome you give, because you have to calculate for, well, what happens if there are 4 people with all this stuff? So it was an interesting challenge. And that's why we landed on this for right now, because we wanted to make the loot that you get out of those treasure chests feel pretty good without having to compete for the inflationary aspect of but it puts out 4 copies for everybody on the team.
So there's a bit of camaraderie / competition when it comes to some of the high-level finds on the map?
Yeah, some of those things are rewarded for that, but ultimately the true power is the mission and the XP and the reward you get at the end of the match, because that's really where all your persistence takes place. Now, Nick's rolling through this right now. If you can you look at one of the walls and just so I can make sure I say this to everybody. So, and we're going to do a little weak point thing. So one of the cool parts about the game is we have a weak point system. These little targets that appear on things you're trying to hit. And hitting those weak points literally doubles the speed at which you're harvesting. Now you don't have to. I'm just as guilty. I'm drinking my coffee. I'm talking to my friend, and we're playing together. And I just let it go, and it's fine. But if you're really trying to optimize your harvesting rates, locking onto those things and actually hitting them doubles the speed at which you're harvesting. So people are always asking like, oh, it feels like it takes a long time. And then I go back and look at their videos of what they're doing. I'm like, man, you're not even aiming. It makes it faster for those who want it. And that little mini game is there to sort of speed it up when you want to do it. And if you're just feeling like, I just want to press some buttons, you don't have to. But it is valuable if you engage in it. And it's one of those things we've tried to teach people through our user experience testing, and we actually added it. It didn't used to be in the skill tree. It used to be just a property that you got from the very beginning. But what we found out is that unless we put it in front of you to buy in that skill tree, people didn't realize they had it or what it did. So we actually added it to the skill tree, so people have to spend a skill point, and they occasionally will look at the video to tell it what it does. So we tried to increase its usability. But if you want a pro tip like that for gathering, that is the number one thing I can tell you.
So just to be clear, it's not always immediately unlocked for characters, which is why some people might miss it.
Yeah. If you're playing the first, but it is literally within the first 2 levels.
Yeah.
So you don't start the game with it, but quickly you'll unlock it.
I gotta say, actually, I like that mechanic as somebody who enjoys building but doesn't like punching rocks for long periods of time.
Yep, absolutely. We have that conversation throughout its development. Is like, what's the right? Actually, I exactly phrase it that like punching rocks, and I'm like, how long do we want to punch rocks in this thing? One of the other things you asked me before about heroes and things you can do with them, it's actually why we added the expedition system. Now the expedition system is just another squad that you can manage. You can send your heroes out on timed missions to bring you back resources when you can't play. And so they'll just go out and they'll gather stuff for you, and then they come back and bring you back loot for just doing nothing. And so one of the cool parts about it, people like talking about like, hey, I want to get the right balance of punching rocks to fighting, is that over time people begin to realize like, oh, you mean if I send out a bunch of guys on missions after I log off and I log back in, they bring you back loot and so you'll have resources to start the whole new gameplay, and you may not even have to punch a bunch of rocks as a result of it. So that's what we brought. So I've got a couple of friends of mine who also are like, yeah, I only can do this a certain amount of time, and I'm like, cool. Like, you just log in, collect all your stuff. They can go off and do 1 or 2 missions, and then they send their stuff back out, and then they're out again for the day. And then obviously people who love to grind it's out there for you too.
Going back real quick, for those of you just joining us, I'm here with Darren Sugg, creative director of Fortnite. We are talking about high-level guns, creative ways to build things, good zombie strategies. Actually, that'd be a good one to talk about next. If you appreciate what we're doing here, feel free to give us a like, subscribe to our channel so we can do more awesome Fortnite coverage. This game will be in development for a year before it goes free to play, and it helps us out a lot. So let's talk about, in addition to tactics, and we were just talking about how people compete over some of the high-level treasure. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about loot scarcity. So how do you get that balance right? Because it feels like with the Founders Pack, sometimes I feel like I'm being grossly rewarded, and sometimes I feel like I cannot get through this wave because I don't have enough bolts to craft the ammo that I need.
Yeah.
How do you handle loot scarcity? Like, what is the point where a player's feeling like they're getting enough stuff out of their efforts? Mm-hmm. They're not getting like the chatter whited from Atheon. Versus like, if you give people too much, then they also get turned off because it's too easy for them. So what's that balance?
Yeah, well, that's that's the trick. Like, so right now, like one of the things I'll say about balance is like that corner piece. Those are copper ore, and they're used to make some of the more powerful weapons. So keep your eyes out for any of the ores, silver ore, and they help, but they are usually hidden away in the spot. And in the corner, hang on, Nick, if you go back, there's also ammo crates on the ground in the right-hand corner, or left-hand corner, sorry. And basically, they give you a bunch of stuff. So number one, it's like, how do we handle the balance? Well, the first thing we're going to try to do is make sure that we're educating people that they know that these kind of things exist. Our number one difference is that initially, when you start playing the game, you're like, there's so much stuff in the world. I don't know what to get, what to search. Like, there's another crate up there on that shelf, and it's like, and education is the first thing of like realizing what comes from that. So that's the first thing, and it's just basically the insider baseball version of it is like we call it instrumentation. It's like, is the player understand what's going on in the game world, and they have questions about it. And Nick's going to show you what I do too specifically. Go through these kitchens. You see those nuts and bolts. He's going to destroy that stove. Also going to get rusty mechanical parts and more nuts and bolts. Same thing is true. Destroy cars. Get metal. Like if you're looking for very specific things, some of the real world analogs actually works out. It's like, oh, I could probably get nuts and bolts out of it by destroying this fridge because it's like that's just the thing that holds it together. So when you're looking about we're wondering about loot scarcity, it's like actually some of the stuff it maps to more real world. So if you're like, hey, I'm out of bullets, look around the world for containers. But also if you want to make your own stuff, you learn that like, oh, cars are good sources of nuts and bolts. Houses and kitchens also have them. And we generally find early game when you're experiencing that scarcity, our test is generally because you don't understand like where to go get awesome shit. Even destroying that toilet should hook them up. Oh, we just got bacon out of it.
I don't think you want to eat that bacon.
So yeah, that's a thing. But yeah, after he destroyed it, he got some more nuts and bolts. So if you're looking for that kind of things, the world probably has it in it. It's just a question if you know where to look. And over time, we're actually going to build probably an encyclopedia where you can go inside and be like, hey, let me see this item and where I can frequently find that. Again, it's just one of those features we haven't fully developed, but we're going to need it. But I guarantee you the internet right now is making the wiki that's going to tell you how to go about get the most optimal version of this. But it should be in the game. So that's one of the first things we do in terms of handling like loot scarcity. Other thing to find out too is if Nick really wants wood, best thing to do is actually hit the trees. Tearing down somebody's garage door is actually a little less effective than just going to the raw materials. And the same thing is true of stone. Giant piles of rocks is way more efficient than burning down somebody's brick wall. So if you're looking to optimize like, hey, loot distribution, it's like go to the raw materials. And it just so happens that the air quotes raw material for metal in most urban areas is cars. It's a little weird, but hey, there are the old days cars were made out of metal, not plastic.
So if you want to make bullets, you go into somebody else's house and punch their refrigerator.
Yep, and you blow up their refrigerator or break up their car.
You heard it here. That's where bullets come from. Interesting too. So also like the raw resources, like trees and rocks, give you more than breaking down houses and walls.
Yep. Nice.
So I think probably one of the last things we should talk about is strategy, because I think that's a big part of the wave defense portion of this game.
Yep.
So I feel like beginners always just wall off the generator and go, I'm good, and then they get bad results, or like it's tough. Whereas what I'm seeing right now are the experts, they go and they wall off the spawn and build pathways for the zombies to walk through traps.
Yep.
So the zombies, just to confirm, the zombies will like generally follow the path of least resistance, correct?
Within reason, they will. So we're not, it's interesting. We are not quite where there are tower defense games that are actually linear. They express where the pathing is. We're a bit more dynamic. The creatures are a bit more, basically more intelligent than that. Oh, there's a smasher in there. So those, let's see if you can hit. Nice job. So Nick hit him with the airstrike before he came in. So the way the pathing works is if you create things where it's not too overwhelming, so you don't want to have a lot of like switchbacks and all these other things to go through early on. Ultimately, the best way to express it is creating some large paths where you are kind of guessing where the creatures are. So 2 or 3 areas opened up, so tile areas, and then you build roofs and walls around that. And those kind of wide paths tend to work better for a bunch of players. I've watched some outpost defenses, some storm shield defenses, where players, if you just try to funnel them down to one little nub, the AI don't play like that. But if you get them a little bit wide, 2, 3 areas, you have a much better way of exposing the trap damage and, and making areas.
So sometimes the zombies are just like, no, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, they're not linear paths. They try to calculate a best path, and so but you can kind of mess with them a little bit.
Seems like those low walls are one of the largest effective defenses when it comes to shooting.
Yep.
Versus, are windows just for show?
So it's interesting. Windows, you would think are a little less good, but the smasher actually will roll through fences quite easily. So they counter your something we used to call fence town. And basically, if you just put fences, you can shoot over. That's good, but if they're really weak to siege units like smashers. So windows on full walls are not as weak against those siege units like the smasher, which is that big purple creature. So it's really about what you want, and you'll quickly. It's kind of weird because initially, there are combinations that seem really effective, but then as the game evolves, more creatures begin to come online, and then you realize like all these fences don't do anything against the smasher. So although I can shoot over them, if I make an entire base out of them and I let that smasher get in there, he can destroy like whole lines because he'll charge through and destroy many of them all in a row. So it's important to like sort of work it out. Now, one of the things I think we're going to be messing with a little bit, and even it's something that I personally have been wanting to improve, is the ability to see out of those windows while you're holding a gun. It's a little bit tricky in third person, so I want to basically make that a little bit easier.
I noticed in the menus there was a first person. Is it in the build right now?
Totally is a first person camera toggle, but we put it in there largely as an experiment, a couple of builds, actually quite a while ago. It's probably December of last year. And I asked, we talked about taking it out, and I was like, you know what? Just leave it in there. There's going to be a bunch of players that want to play around with it, but that view doesn't have any of the gun positioning, so you can't see the physical gun you're holding. It's just a cursor, and then you can explore using it. And it does work, but it's not really fully supported. It's one of those things like many aspects of Fortnite is sort of like we were experimenting with it, and I said, hey, we can just leave it in there, but we didn't actually. It's not a polished experience. So, but it's fun to play. Actually, I've played in it. And it's kind of fun when you're exploring a building in first-person mode and you're just looking around. It can be kind of creepy.
Punching everybody else's fridges.
Yes.
I don't know if the survivors would appreciate that.
Listen, like you're bringing them back to the base and shooting creatures. Sacrifices have to be made.
Visual design of this game. So I did notice it's interesting. I think it seems like the visual design for the characters are kind of across the spectrum for different ways people dress.
Yep.
I actually noticed a wide range of body types. What was the philosophy behind the appeal of the visual design of the characters?
It's basically two-pronged. The world of Fortnite is obviously stylized, and so we wanted to have some really cool, quirky-looking people in the game world, and you'll see a lot of our sort of people design on the survivors. The average Joes are feeling pretty stylized, but then over time we decided we really wanted the hero cards and the heroes themselves to feel a bit larger than life and feel powerful. So we took a design pass a while back to actually make these heroes big and a bit larger than life, because they are doing heroic things in the game world, and that design is supposed to be form follows function with regards to this. It's like this is the case where we're playing as a ninja here, right? And she's got her pants on that enable her to move, and obviously she's got her little ninja hood that's down in this version. But you can still sort of iconically understand what she is. And you'll see her little piece of, like, everybody in the world of Fortnite who is a hero kind of has a piece of technology that allows them to be super awesome. And in this case, the ninja has their little double jump boots. And you can see that the little fire coming out of that piece. And so that's their character design. You'll see all the unique heroes out there. You'll see the soldiers with their grenades. They're super powerful, and that's just sort of the form follows function of all them. But the overall style was always rooted into that, a little bit of the larger than life Pixar, plus the Avengers sort of feeling of like these guys are heroic and powerful and awesome. That's Lars going up in the thing. He's the guy who pilots the van.
Clothing customization?
Twofold answer there is that as you evolve heroes, you unlock more accessories on them. So as they become more powerful, like that motorcycle helmet that dude's wearing is a result of him achieving his evolution. And certain heroes also have backpacks as well that unlock over time. Since we use a hero card model, the appearances are bound to the actual card itself. It's like that guy wears these pants and this hat. But I bet in a long enough line, although I don't know when, since there's a couple of other things in front of it, that we may come up with a way for us to transform or collect appearances. If I unlock that helmet on this guy by leveling him to a certain level and maybe putting that into an inventory and transferring that to another card, It's just interestingly, the way the model works, it makes it a little more complicated than you would think. But in a long game, I bet you we'll probably come back around to that.
So I think a good way to end this stream would be to punch some llamas, if we have any loot llamas, because I gotta say that is probably one of my favorite things to do.
All right.
Usually my kids walk by and say, "Ooh, candy."
That is right. Yeah. So, yeah, we more or less are, the sort of metaphor we have is, we're more or less a card pack game because we have, as we said, referring to cards, and like our manifestation of those packs are the llamas, and they're llama pinatas specifically, not just llamas. So before you blow it up, if you right click on that bad boy in the loot tab, go back to there, and just push down the button, you can make. They talk to you. They say different things. The llamas have different personalities. They sort of do their thing, and so one day we were like, well, we needed to have a container for stuff. What did we decide to do? And the artists got together and they made some really cool like vendor tech looking boxes and everything. And then somebody came back and said, what if we did pinatas and we'll make it in the shape of a llama? And actually at that moment, everyone was like, are you, like some people were both horrified and amused at the same time, and we're like, let's do it. Let's go all in. So this is that's how the llama was born. You on this account, you don't have any more founders things. So I know you can't.
Leave it on my credit card.
Yes. So I don't know. We can't open any llamas on this. I feel bad actually.
Developer credit card throwdown.
No, actually, the thing is like, it's an interesting. Yeah, the thing is like I'm personally playing on a standard account too. So you were talking about that earlier. It's like, hey, I get the rewards that the players get on that level too. So, man, one day though. That actually, to be fair though, there's a lot of videos from our community about opening llamas on the internet. So I'm sure if you want to go look it up.
And for those not playing the game, you do get them through the course of normal play, but there's also a transaction system where you can buy the V-Bucks.
The amount of they are awarded via gameplay, via quests versus via your collection book. That's where you put like duplicate cards you have, and by filling that collection book up, it actually gives you more stuff that allows you to get more card packs. And then there, as you get farther and farther up, there are also missions that also drop V-Bucks. And then on top of that, helping other people, this is an early game tip, helping other people with their Storm Shield defense automatically gives you mini llamas. So helping other people with their bases is key, and it's like, and we reward you quite well for doing it. So if you're like wondering like, hey, how do I get mini llamas? It's like, go help other people. You'll see them in global chat, and they're like, hey, I'm doing another outpost defense. You want to go join that stuff because we really want to incentivize people to be able to play together.
So enjoy them llamas. You heard it here.
Yep.
That was Darren Sugg, creative director on Fortnite. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys were watching us on YouTube. So, if you guys can like or subscribe to that channel, that's a big help to us. Or if you saw this on GameSpot, also just really appreciate you guys talking to us in the chat, because we take those types of questions and we talk to developers, and then we can do live streams like this. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed Fortnite.